You're listening to the Call Kent podcast, where Kent C. Dodds answers questions and gives insights to software engineers like you. Now, let's hear the call.
And this is a cool feature. I was just in a heated conversation about test cleanup with one of my coworkers, and then I finished my conversation and I was like, I think Kent had something about like not using before each and after each anymore. I wanted to go read that. And so I'm going to look that up. But then I also remembered you had on Twitter your office hours. And I was like, Kent, office hours, this is perfect. I have a perfect question for him. It looks like I just missed it. I would love to talk to you about test cleanup, whether test cleanup should happen in the test or in an after each, and when you might choose one or the other. I wanted to describe the situation that my coworker and I were discussing in our argument. And I think it's very interesting. I think you'd have a great insights being the testing master. Thank you for everything you put out, and I hope to hear back from you. Thanks.
And that was the call. Here's what Kent had to say.
Hey there, Danny. Thank you so much for the question. So yes, I do have opinions about test cleanup. I have this blog post. The one that you're referring to probably is avoid nesting when you're testing. And so, yeah, this one's mostly about using nested describe blocks and using before each to share setup and things like that. And in here, I talk about how it's just so much better to use like functions to share setup and things, just because it's much easier to follow. And I also reference avoid hasty abstractions, AHA, which I actually also have a blog post titled AHA Testing that I'll link to here as well. So also a little bit relevant to our conversation here. So in any case, I definitely use before each and after each for certain scenarios that can be very useful. In fact, testing library has built-in support for before it's after each. It will do cleanup, because testing library will actually muck up the global DOM in rendering stuff, and so we automatically clean up for you, which is quite nice, I must say. And also, like MSW, there's some cleanup that you will want to do after each one of your tests and stuff like that. So we definitely don't like completely avoid using before each and after each. But I've just found that a lot of people will use before each in particular to share setup logic, and that is a big mistake. Those should just be functions instead. It's much easier to follow rather than just like reassigning values. And thanks to TypeScript, it's actually a huge pain to do it that way. And so people are, I think, naturally going the function route rather than using before each. But one thing that's important for you to understand about doing cleanup is that if your test fails and you're doing cleanup inside of your test, then your cleanup won't happen in the event of a test failure unless you're using after each. Or I suppose if you're wrapping your entire function in a try catch, which you wouldn't want to do if you wrap the entire test in a try catch, the contents of the function, not the test block. But anyway, yeah, you wouldn't want to do that. So yeah, you don't want to do cleanup at the end of a test callback function, because if that test fails, then the cleanup won't happen. And so that is one reason why it's a good idea to do cleanup inside of a after each. I actually go into depth on this in the testing workshop of Epic Web. That's part of the full stack series. Because the example that we use is with Playwright, but in that the solution is also actually, I think we start with after each, and then we move into a Playwright test fixture, which is kind of a special thing all on its own. But in any case, you don't want to typically do your like if you're mucking with the global environment, you don't want to do the cleanup inside of the test itself. You actually do want to do the cleanup inside of an after each. But yeah, I am not a huge fan of before each, except for certain scenarios. And also sometimes it can be useful to do your cleanup in the before each as well. Not all the time, but there's a discussion to be had around specific scenarios for doing the cleanup in the before each rather than in the after each. But yeah, typically your before each is going to be, okay, let me set up the global environment that's going to apply to all of these tests. And then if you have some values that you need outside of that, like so there's some setup that's just like, okay, let's get the database in a good spot or whatever. Then yeah, that can happen in the before each. But if you ever feel like, oh, I need this value inside of my test, that's when you should be using a setup function that can actually return the value, and then you just call that function inside of your tests. And then for any cleanup that needs to happen, that happens best in an after each. And sometimes the thing, you may not need something in your test, but you do need it in your after each. And so there are cases where you're going to declare a variable outside of all your tests. You will assign that variable in a before each, and then you will reference that variable in the after each for cleanup. So it's not that you just never do this. My article is more about avoiding specific issues with the way that you do your setup for individual tests. Hopefully that's pretty clear, and I hope that you and your coworker can resolve any differences that you have. Thanks a lot, Danny. Take care.
This has been the Call Kent podcast. Learn more about Kent at kentcdodds.com and get your own questions answered at kentcdodds.com/calls.